start the recording because we are starting in Genesis 23. And there's a lot of ground. I'm not going to necessarily read all of this time because there's a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily need to read it word for word. So I'll try, if I get going too fast, say, Linda, where are you? You know, what verse you on? But we'll start with 23:1. And it says, "Now Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died in Hebron, basically, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her." Now, Sarah is actually the only woman in the Bible who is given an age. She's the only woman who the Bible says how long she lived. And she's also the only woman that the Bible has lifted up as an example of a godly woman. Not that there aren't other godly women and noted as godly women, but she's the only one that two other places the Bible lifts up as a godly woman. Even Mary,
Yeah, I was going to say,
Jesus'
not even
mother.
Mary, huh?
That's pretty
Mother
exclusive,
Mary.
isn't it?
it's pretty, yeah,
Yeah, boy.
it's very,
That is something,
yeah.
but she's not mentioned for that.
She's not, and that's probably one of the main arguments between Catholicism and Protestantism is the focus on Mary, because the New Testament, you know, while they said she is blessed among women and her name would be remembered forever, you know, the Protestants feel that she is not meant to be venerated the way the Catholic faith does.
Yeah. We even had a prayer just for her,
Yeah,
Hail Mary.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's right. That's one of the main differences. It's a big one.
Yeah. So what's interesting, what follows next, and I'll read some of it because I think it's interesting. You'll see this throughout the Bible. And if you don't know what's going on, it can be very confusing to our culture because Abraham decided that he needed to buy a burial place for Sarah. So he goes to the people there. And he says, "I am a stranger," and I'm in verse 4 here. "I'm a stranger and a sojourner among you. Give me a burial site among you that I may bury my dead out of my sight." And jumping to verse 6, they say, "Hear us, my Lord. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our graves. None of us will refuse you his grave for burying your dead." So again, understand at this point that Abraham is extremely wealthy. He's extremely, a lot of people, a lot of herds, a lot of animals. So he is definitely an intimidation for some of the people that are here. And so starting again in verse 7, I just think this is kind of funny. "So Abraham rose and bowed to the people of the land, the sons of Heth, and he spoke with them saying, 'If it is your wish for me to bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and approach Ephron the son of Zohar for me, that he may give me the cave which he owns, which is at the end of his field, for the full price. Let him give it to me in your presence for a burial site.'" So in other words, Abraham's saying, "I'll pay for it. That's the one I want. Pay for it." And this is what they say. "Now Ephron was sitting among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the sons of Heth, even of all who went in at the gate of his city, saying, 'No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of the sons of my family, I give it to you. Bury your dead.'" Now, if that were today, what would we do? Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Ah, that's really nice of you. Thank you.
If you insist.
If you insist. "And Abraham bowed before the people of the land, and he spoke to Ephraim in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, 'If you will only please listen to me, I will give the full price of the field. Accept it from me, that I may bury my dead there.'" And this is interesting, how he answers. And Ephraim answers Abraham, saying to him, "My Lord, listen to me. A piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? Bury your dead."
And Abraham still not giving it.
The point is, okay.
You think he was thinking it's going to come back to me? I didn't pay you for this
Well, let me read let me read this. And Abraham listened to Ephraim, and Ephraim weighed out for Ephraim the silver which he had named in the hearing of the sons, 400 shekels of silver, commercial standard. And then the plot and the cave became his. Okay. I always wonder about this, because this happens several times in the Bible. It's like, what is this all about? This is common negotiation, okay? The fact that Abraham took the first offer was incredibly generous on his part, but he was a wealthy man. Because basically this is what makes the negotiation. What's 400 shekels between you and I? Go ahead, bury your dead. And Abraham's supposed to say something like, well, I think maybe 320 or, that type of thing. But it's just the way the culture dealt with negotiations. It's not really that he was intending to give it. He fully expected to get paid for it. It's just the way they negotiated. But again, just here, the fact that Abraham did not negotiate, just simply tell me what your price is. He paid it, and that land became his. And so Sarah was buried there. Any questions? Okay. Jumping to chapter 24. Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, please place your hand under my thigh. What is that all about?
It's mentioned a couple times in the Bible, and I don't know what that means.
Any ideas? It's a weird practice, isn't it?
It's like a pledge that I'll do what you ask me to do.
It is. But why is it like that?
Just, isn't there an artery there that
Well,
goes to the heart?
this is from your medical background, because trust me, they probably didn't know that. It's a little bit more. It's a little bit more of the Hebrew faith than that. Circumcision. Circumcision is the covenant with God, so it's this sacred covenant. So when someone asks you to put their hand in your thigh, you're essentially calling the covenant that they have with the Lord. So it's a serious covenant that you're making with the person. It's definitely going into private area. We definitely have a little bit more space around us. But that's what it's all about. And Abraham goes on, I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of Canaanites among whom I live, but you shall go to my country and to my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant said to him, suppose a woman will not be willing to follow me to this land. Should I take your son back to the land from where you came? Then Abraham said to him, beware, lest you take my son back there. And then he goes on to say, God swore this land to my descendants. So he was Abraham. First of all, this servant, whose name is Eliezer, Eliezer itself means helper. He is being sent back to to where Abraham came from and where Sarah came from, to get a wife for his son Isaac. And of course the servant is willing to go. And if I go back, it says Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned. So this is a very high ranking, one of his closest servants. If you could think about, of course we're not to the story of Joseph, but you know the story of Joseph in that type of thing.
Plus Eliezer had been the heir.
Right.
Until Isaac.
Until Isaac, yeah. Good point. Very good point. Because if it hadn't been for Isaac, so this would be a good point for treachery, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You get rid of the son, but of course he's not taking the son with him. Okay. But Abraham goes on and says, whatever you do, do not take my son back there, because this is his land. I just don't want a woman from the land, from this land, to be his wife. Now, do you have any idea how far he had to go back and get a wife? 900 miles.
Wow.
Yeah. A straight track as the crows fly or whatever, I think it's something like 500, but the pathway to get there is like 900 miles to go from where they were all the way there. It's basically as far as from here almost to the border of Arkansas, walking. Yes, and he takes great many gifts, you know, great gold and wealth and camels and all this stuff. It becomes this huge trek across the country to go to this land of Ur to try and find a wife. Now, think about the fact that he was the heir. Don't really know if he knew if he was the heir or not. I would assume he would.
Yeah, I mean, just from his position.
From his position, yeah, if he hadn't had a son.
Yeah.
But he is an incredibly, incredibly faithful servant. To go on this, to take his Abraham, his master's lead, to go on this, to take everything. And as he's going, he's praying. He's truly trying to be faithful. He is absolutely one of the best servant images that you could get here, because he's going and saying, Lord, let me be successful. Let this work the way it's supposed to. Let me find my master's, the bride for my master. And he prayed. Have you ever negotiated with God? Have you ever said, you felt like God was sending you on a mission, and it's sort of like as you're doing it, you kind of say, well, God, if they're wearing a red dress or something, or they're wearing purple or something, I'm going to know that's the person. Or I'm going to know that's the situation. Probably don't do that much. I mean, we do kind of want to know God's will, God's purpose, you know. But he actually said, before he ever met the woman, he kind of said, God, this is how I'm going to know whether or not you're bringing this woman to me. And it wasn't an impossible task, but it was a challenging task. It's not a task that a woman would necessarily choose to take on, okay? Because what he did was said, Lord, when I come to this watering hole, I'm going to ask a woman for a glass of water, and she's going to volunteer to give water to my camels, okay? Again, not impossible, but a hard enough job that a woman normally would not volunteer to do that for a stranger.
Okay.
Make sense? Okay. So, and I'm going here. If I jump to 13, this servant Eliezer says, Behold, I am standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now, may it be that the girl to whom I say, Please let down your jar so that I may drink, and who answers, Drink, and I will water your camels also. May she be the one whom thou hast for thy servant Isaac, and by this I shall know that thou hast shown loving kindness to my master. So again, I mean, you got a really good example of a servant. His whole mindset was to try and get the best bride for Isaac, to follow Abraham's wishes. And he's making a deal with God before he gets there. You know, it's not like afterwards, not trying to second guess God. He's up front. God, if you do this. And of course, Rebecca comes. And if you jump to verse 16, the girl was very beautiful. And when you hear in the Bible, very beautiful, I mean, she's very beautiful. And she's a virgin, so no man has had relations with her. And she went down the spring, and she filled her jar and came up. And the servant ran to meet her and said, Please let me drink a little water from your jar. And she said, Drink, my lord. And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now, when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking. So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw, and she drew for all of his camels. Now look at verse 21, and I might ask some of you to look at your versions. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord has made his journey successful or not. Does any of yours, verse 21, say anything a little bit different from that?
Mine does. And the man wondered at her, held his peace, but whether will the Lord have made his journey prosperous or not? He wondered.
He wondered.
He was wandering.
Yeah.
Mine says, the man gazed at her in silence to learn whether the Lord had prospered his journey or not.
Yeah, it all means the same.
It's pretty much,
It's the same.
he was actually in awe of the fact that, hey God, I asked you and you did this. Did you really do this? Is this really happening?
Yeah. I think it was between his answer to that, how pretty she was too.
That could do it, yep. Because that would certainly be successful. I mean, bringing a beautiful bride back would certainly help the offering.
Have you ever heard that called putting out a fleece?
Do you know where that comes from?
In the threshing floor, and the fleece would be wet if it was.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
even more. Come on, you know it. You know it. Yes, you do. Gideon. Gideon's the one who put out the fleece to test God.
Okay.
Yeah, so when you hear putting out the fleece, that's Gideon's story. Because he put out the fleece twice. The one night he said, make the fleece wet, but everything around it dry. And I could have this reverse. And then the next night he said, make everything else wet, but the fleece dry.
Yeah.
And God did it both times, both.
His daughter always talks about, we're putting out a fleece.
Put out fleece, yeah. That's Gideon. And again, it's interesting because some people can put out a fleece, some people can test God, can question God, and some people can't. Why?
How close they are to God. How close they are to God.
How close they are, the heart,
Their heart.
the intention of the heart. Gideon's one of those that it obviously wasn't his heart, because to me, his challenge was putting out the fleece was really challenging God. When you compare that to Zechariah's, what do you mean you're going to answer my prayer? Zechariah gets struck with silence, but Gideon gets answered. So it just all has to do with the heart. When God knows that you're sincerely trying to do his will, but you just want to make sure that this is your will, God. That's what I just need to know if this is your will. God honors that. As opposed to kind of this mocking, like, yeah, sure, God, whatever you say. That doesn't go well. And the first thing that the man does after this, after she has finished watering the camels, is he puts on her a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets and a nose ring and all this kind of stuff. He just kind of inundates her with wealth. So think about this from Rebecca's standpoint. She's a young girl, attractive, but she's probably lived in Bear Creek her whole life, and she went to school with all the boys in Bear Creek her whole life, and all of a sudden she goes out to the local Dollar General, and up drives a Cadillac and a limousine and gold and all this stuff, and the guy says, hey, will you go get me a Pepsi? Sure, I'll get you a Pepsi, and I'll get one for your people who are with you. She brings out all these Pepsis, and all of a sudden he's inundating her with gold.
That's right.
So, she was a little bit of shock and awe too. This isn't, again, just a servant. This is a huge company of people giving her favor. And so he tells her the story and finds out that she is, in fact, from Abraham's family. She is Abraham's family. So, again, when Eliezer was looking at her, he was like, okay, God, she's beautiful, and she did what we agreed would have happened. Now, is she of the right family? Who is she? That was the last piece. Could this have been that easy? Of course, we don't know what other things. We don't know how many women he went through to get to this one. But it seems so easy. And in fact, she has a brother, Laban, who is the son of the brother of Abraham. So, this is the same family. So, she goes running back to her family with all this gold, and of course the family comes running out saying, well, let's meet these people. And so Eliezer and the whole crew come back and tell the whole story again, how my servant, my master owns all this. He's very wealthy. He's in the land of Canaan. You know him. He's a relative. And we're looking for a bride, and your daughter fits the bill. And if you would agree, we're gonna have a marriage. Well, they agree. And so he basically gives them all of these gifts, all of this wealth, and all this stuff that he brought back to them. We will go on, if you don't know the story, we'll go on and learn a whole lot more about Laban in the days to come. But what would you think? I mean, again, this is arranged marriages, but those are normal. What do people want from an arranged marriage?
Like a dowry or something.
Right. They were looking for comfort. They were looking for wealth. And what Laban was looking at, this huge herd of camels and all this gold that the guy was offering them, and sure, you want my sister. Why not? Right?
I'll be glad to give if you give me all the gold.
That's right. That's right.
And 900 miles away.
900 miles away.
What a coincidence.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, how was Laban related to,
He's Rebecca's brother.
huh?
Laban is Rebekah's brother,
Mm-hmm.
and Laban is the son of Nahor, I believe, and Nahor is Abraham's brother.
Oh. So they were really.
That's pretty
That's
close.
pretty close
Yeah,
relations.
cousins.
Niece and nephew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
close.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, they did that back in the day.
Yes.
Because Sarah and Abraham were actually half brothers and sister. They had the same father.
Wow.
Same father, but different
I
mothers.
did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So when Abraham was telling those kings that she's my sister,
Mhm.
he wasn't lying.
No, it wasn't.
He was just leaving out the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, she was a half sister, but she was also my wife. That little piece of information makes a big difference. But yeah, this is what they did in those days. What's interesting though is that Eliezer was asked to stay and eat before they ever started the negotiation, and he said, no, we're going to settle this. I need to know right now whether my trip is successful. He refused to take any food, and once the deal was made, they sat down and ate. But he wanted to leave right away. He wanted to leave the next day. And Laban was saying, what's your hurry? Just stay a while. There's an echo here to our Christian walk. Okay? When you have been given a mission and a calling from God, and you set about that mission, and you are successful, and you are to basically embrace it. Because what happened is Eliezer was supposed to bring Rebekah back and allow, the continuation of the story, right? But what did Laban want? Just wait. Just wait. Now, remember, Laban was not necessarily a believer. Abraham left Ur following God. He left behind family that were not necessarily believers. There's so many times that we hear a call from God, but we say, let me get to retirement, or let me get to such and such a point. What's the hurry? I'll get to it. Instead of being willing to do like Eliezer and say, okay, no, we gotta go the next day. See what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. It's like when Jesus was told, let me bury my father.
Yep.
Yeah.
He said, let the dead bury their
The
dead.
dead.
Let the dead bury their dead.
Yep.
And if you figure he had just come 900 miles,
Yeah.
it might have been attractive to kick back for a few days.
It would have been. And be taken care of and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Which proves how really faithful Eliezer was, because he just walked 900 miles. He's going to spend a night, and he's going to turn around and go right back. Yeah. I mean, it's very tempting, and that's really the call of the world on us. Is, when we're called by God to do something, to do a mission, it's real easy to just kind of kick back and say, well, I just got over this, or, there's all kinds of pull that the world gives you. But
What would have happened if the disciples had decided they didn't want to quit fishing? They dropped what they had and they followed Jesus.
it's a perfect example. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of echoes. We'll get to that at the end. There are a lot of echoes here to Jesus, but that's exactly right. Because again, those fishermen were young. One of them left their father. See, Dad, the business is yours. So what Laban did was Laban said, well, we'll leave this up to Rebekah. It's up to her whether or not she goes with you tomorrow. And Rebekah said, sure, I'll go with them. And she does.
Think how long they
Is this the
traveled,
one?
900 miles,
Right.
probably a month and a half. Or, yeah, at least a month and a half.
Yeah.
5 miles a day, it's 6
Well,
months.
They could probably do more than 5 miles a
They-
day
So
back
you
in
did from
that.
there,
Yeah.
I'm thinking they did over 10 a day,
I'm
because they were
Thinking-
made like that.
I'm thinking they could do as many as 30 a day walking.
I don't know. That
it's
would
a
be,
caravan, it's not just a group of people, it's a caravan.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
didn't have
At 20
nitrogen.
at 20 miles a day, it would be 45 days.
month and a half.
Yeah. So you're talking about a month and a half to 2 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Month and a half at the quickest, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. And of course, Sarah took with her Rebecca. I'm sorry, Rebecca took with her servants and things like that, so she wasn't alone with Eliezer, because I'm sure Eliezer had plenty of men with him too.
This is not the one where they had to wait 7 days or something.
No. We're not there yet.
That's another one.
Yep, we're getting there. We're getting there. That is yet to come.
Okay.
Yep. So what's interesting is that if we jump to verse 61, then Rebekah arose with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now Isaac had come from going to Beer Lahoroi, for he was living in the Negev. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening. So Isaac was in prayer, essentially what that means, is he knew that his servant was going off to do this. So he was in prayer, he was meditating. And he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. And she said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." Then she took her veil and covered herself, and the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Is there anything missing from that story?
It's like, come on, let's go.
That's true.
Is there a wedding?
That's the other thing, yeah. There was
No ceremony.
There was no wedding. There was no wedding. They were wealthy. They could have had a wedding, and it really the thing that I think our culture misses out on when we start thinking about the purity culture and the understanding of marriage is that in the Bible, the marriage wasn't really the party. There wasn't a white dress, and there wasn't a pastor, and there weren't vows. What there was a party going on while the marriage was being consummated, because that was the marriage. Once a man took a woman as his wife, in a biblical knowing sense, she was his wife. And that law hasn't really changed. You know, when a man and a woman, a boy and a girl are together, in God's eyes, they're married. And what God joins together, the two become one flesh. And that is
It's just the culture. that reality escaped in the culture.
And there's also in that just a total submission to the culture.
Mhm.
If he went off and brought this woman back,
Mhm.
that's my wife.
That's my wife, yep. Yep. It didn't hurt that
Beautiful.
she was beautiful, and from this account, he was probably fairly good looking himself,
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
and certainly wealthy,
Mhm.
so.
So what differentiated the wives from the concubines? If there was no wedding?
Really none. As a matter of fact, if we go on, Abraham, let me answer that by jumping to 25, okay? Now, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah, and she bore him 6 more children. But Abraham gave all of his wealth to Isaac. Now look at verse 6 in my Bible. Let me see what yours says. But to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living and sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east. So the Bible says that he took a wife,
Yeah.
but then it calls it a concubine. So in effect, there really is very little different. If a man and a woman are together, they're husband and wife. And there actually are in the Levitical laws that if you take a woman, even if you don't call her your wife, if you are with her, then you have to take care of her. You just can't toss her back out. There are some rules because basically you've taken her as a wife.
So in essence, a man could have numerous wives.
And they did.
Yeah.
They did. But notice that Abraham didn't. I mean, he did, but Sarah was dead. So there's nothing wrong with him taking another wife.
But is it a wife or a concubine?
It's a wife.
But
It's a wife, but she is the most likely reason why they call it both things is Abraham is righteous in saying, this is my wife. I mean, it was lawful even under God's law because Sarah was dead, so he can take another wife. And he did it the way he was supposed to, but she wasn't Sarah. She wasn't the wife of the promise. And the sons did not get the inheritance. So to kind of put this second wife in the proper place,
You gotta call her a
they
concubine.
called her a concubine.
But they said that she was taken from his group, the group of concubines.
I'm
She was taken
I'm
from
reading
that.
Where are
there
you reading
was
that?
the wife and then there was also the concubine.
But the sons of his concubines, yeah, there
Yeah,
there
so
might
he
have
had
been
several.
more.
How old was Abraham here?
He dies at 175.
That was right in the next, thing,
Yeah,
number 7.
yeah, 175 years old. And back when he sent Eliezer to go get a wife for his son, he's considered old then, and yet now we hear the story of him having another wife. But again, this could be, all right, I think it says in here that Isaac was 30 years old when Rebekah came. It's a possibility that this story of the next wife is kind of intermixed. In other words, it wasn't that Rebekah came and then he had another wife. It could be the story of Rebekah and Isaac. And then, oh yeah, by the way, during this time he got another wife and had all these children. I'd have to do a little bit of math to try and figure that out. But yeah, essentially there really isn't, in biblical law, there really isn't a lot of difference between concubines and wives. If a man takes a woman in that way, then she's technically a wife. But yeah, then and again, in Levitical law, there's protections for them if the man decides he doesn't want them any longer.
But there was
Questions?
divorce, though.
Hmm?
There was divorce.
There's always divorce, yes. they, what was it, during Moses or something, somebody said, how could I, if I find my wife cheating on me, can I get a divorce? And they said, yes, if she's, I think, signed papers.
Yeah, in the case of infidelity,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even Jesus said in the case of infidelity,
Mm-hmm.
but that's really the only legitimate case.
Was this written, it's like he had several concubines,
It's possible,
not
yeah.
marriages.
Hmm,
That's what I see.
yeah. Well,
It's like one wife at a time.
another,
but-
another wife at a time,
But
but
then
they-
concubines too.
yeah. Yeah,
There's no telling how many.
yeah, there's really is no telling. I actually hadn't seen the sons of his concubines, that's plural,
Mhm.
yeah.
He's busy.
He was busy, but, the only,
Very affluent.
and at his age, you know,
That's what I was asking, how old was he?
There's a footnote in my Bible where it says concubines in the plural is puzzling. Perhaps it refers to Keturah and Hagar, who are each also referred to as Abraham's wife.
yeah, there you go.
Mhm.
Yeah, because they go, immediately after this, they give the descendants of Ishmael, starting in verse 12. So it's interesting that the sons of Abraham by this second wife, if we go by the first verse of chapter 25, become lands. Like she bore to him Zimran and Jokshan and Midan and Midian and Ishbak and Shuah. Now Midian is the Midianites. So again, we've got the fact that Abraham's children end up becoming nations, including not just Isaac, but and Ishmael. They go ahead. If we look at from 12 to 18, you see again the descendants of Ishmael, and we know that the descendants of Ishmael become the Arab race.
Mhm.
So now we've got the beginnings of the Midianites and all those other things that, again, will become part of the fighting band. Now, I wanted to lift up to you some of the echoes that are in the story of Isaac and Rebekah. Last week we talked about the offering of Isaac, right? When Abraham was called by God to offer him up. And at the last minute he stopped him because there was an offering. Okay? So Isaac and Rebekah are actually an echo or a preview, like what's the word I'm looking for? Other than echo.
Foreshadowing?
Foreshadowing, thank you. A foreshadowing of Jesus in the church. Okay? A son who was risen from the dead, okay? Because he took Isaac to kill him. But he knew that somehow God was going to raise him from the dead. And he took him basically from the altar and did not kill him. The servant Eliezer is a helper, goes to get the bride, which the Holy Spirit is getting the bride of Christ ready, which is the church. And the servant is caring for the bride until he can get her to the son. So we are being cared for. I mean, the whole purpose of the church is to get the body of Christ ready for the coming of Christ. To purify her, to have her ready. That's why the whole imagery that Jesus gives in the parable of the bridesmaids and the bridegroom and all of that. So all of this is kind of an echo or foreshadowing of what Jesus and the church is all about. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Isn't it amazing?
Uh-huh.
Yep. I'm telling you, when
Also, the acceptance by Isaac of the role set out for him.
Exactly. Yep. He didn't argue, he didn't fight with the offering. He was willing to take it if that's what God demanded. Yep.
And he took the bride that was
And he took the bride that was offered to him. Yeah. Because the servant was making the bride ready. Yep. Yep. All right.
I've only got 8 minutes, so before we go to Isaac's sons, we might actually skip there, right there to the next time, because there's also an echo or foreshadowing of Isaac and Jesus. Because Isaac, just like Jesus, was promised before coming. I mean, for
Yeah.
years and years, Abraham was promised a son, and he had to wait. And the Jewish people, the Israelites, were promised the Messiah. He appeared at the appointed time. God spoke to Abraham and said, "This is when you're going to have a son." And he came at the appointed time when it was right, when it was actually impossible for him to have had a son naturally, which is actually the other thing. They were conceived and born miraculously. Now, obviously, Jesus was born a little bit more miraculously because he was both human and divine. So he did not have a human father, where Isaac did have a human father. Isaac is born of totally of flesh, but it was still
Miraculous.
still conceived in a miraculous situation. Exactly. Both of them were given a name before birth. Both of them were offered as a sacrifice. We're talking about that. And brought back from the dead. Both of them were called to be a blessing for all people. And both of them were preparing a place for the bride. So, again, Jesus was saying, the Old Testament talks about me for people who have eyes to see. So, questions? Y'all are so quiet today. Tonight.
I kind of think sometimes Rebecca, why she favored her one son over the other one. I don't understand why she was. Did she love her both her kids the same? She threw one son aside to make favor with their father.
But the father threw one aside to favor the other two. They both did.
He did too.
Isaac favored Esau. Esau was a man's man. Esau was the hunter, the gatherer.
One could almost conjecture that Rebekah chose the other son because he was sort of left out
Okay. So,
by the father.
so the father, he liked the hunter, the one with the hair all over him.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and
So
I guess
there's-
she favored him because she knew that he was favoring
he,
them.
he was
Okay.
discriminated
Plus he may
against.
have been more sensitive and more
Yeah.
present for her.
Right.
Yeah, present for her,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, he was
would've
definitely
been-
more sensitive and probably more with his mother. So when you see favoring, it doesn't mean that they didn't love the other one. It's just
Preference.
yeah, preference, more nature like. Yeah, if you have a bunch of children, one might be the one that likes to do what you do, so you hang around them more, and it seems like you favor them more. It doesn't mean that you love the other one less. It's just they like to do the things that you like to do,
Yeah.
and that's Jacob liked to do the things that Rebekah liked to do, and Esau was just all about hunting and
You're right.
so. Yeah. We'll get into that more next time. Because I really kind of want to focus on some of this stuff. That's starting to get an important part of the story that I don't want to hurry through. Now, we will not meet next week because I'm going to be at Black Mountain. I'm going to be at the Leaders Conference. So we will meet in 2 weeks from tonight, okay?
Okay.
Okay.